if you do an improvement, if you do it only for yourself, it's not an improvement, it's chaos. That's a big source of confusion because there are work standards and there are standard work. And that's something related but different. A work standard is describing in necessary detail how to do a work. And a work standard is the best known way how to do it. And best means, first of all, safest, best quality, and then efficient.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Chris Rosser. Dr. Chris is a worldwide expert for lean production, Toyota, McKinsey, and Bosch Alumni, and professor for production management at Karlsruhe University of Applied Sciences. He's interested in everything related to lean manufacturing, bottleneck detection and management, as well as historic developments of manufacturing. He blogs about his experiences and research on allaboutlean.com and published books, Faster, Better, Cheaper, on the history of manufacturing, and All About Pole Production, going into details of Kanban and other pole systems. So welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. So first off, tell us where you're connecting from.
Well, I'm right now in my home office in Offenbach. It's 8 p.m. and I'm in between semesters. The last semester ended. The next semester will start in 2 weeks. So I'm having lots of time for home office to write my blog, write on books, and do some research and enjoying myself. Home office is fun.
In Germany, huh? Wonderful.
Yes,
Wonderful.
Germany.
So we like to start our podcast off with a little question. I like to refer to this as the spark, but I'm curious. Tell us about how you got started on this journey. Where did you first get introduced to this concept of
How did I
improvement?
get started on lean? Totally by accident. I was studying in Germany. I went to Australia. I met a professor in Australia from America working in Australia. He liked me. He invited me to do a PhD in America. And so I spent 4 years in America near Boston, University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I enjoyed being abroad. I enjoyed traveling. I enjoyed seeing other countries and actually living there. And next, I wanted to go to a country which is as different as possible from Germany, but still interesting. And I wanted to go to Japan. And I applied for lots of different places. And I got exactly one offer, which happened to be Toyota.
Wow.
Back then, I had no idea about lean. I haven't even heard about lean manufacturing before. But hey, Toyota, I knew Toyota. So I went to Toyota. And since then, I can't get away from the lean topic. And it's great fun.
That's so interesting. What was your job at Toyota?
I was a senior researcher in their research laboratory. I was looking into supply chain management, bottleneck detection, and how to organize material flow between different plants, how to get the fundamentals underneath that working. And yeah, I had great fun.
Interesting. Yeah, we've had a few other folks that had spent some time at Toyota on the podcast as well, and there's always some interesting experiences there. After you worked at Toyota, you've worked at a few other notable places that people might recognize.
McKinsey and Company, also doing consulting all over the world. McKinsey hired me basically because they're looking for lean people. And after 5 years at Toyota, suddenly I was a lean person. So I went 3 years McKinsey doing consulting all over the world. And then another 5 years at Bosch, first also the lean department and later as a manager in the production of heating boilers. And after that, professor at the Karlsruhe University of Applied Sciences.
Interesting.
But still everything connected to lean. And actually in August, I'll go back to Japan for another 7 months to do more lean research on site at different plants in Japan.
So interesting. So other than just kind of stumbling across Toyota, what is it about this discipline that has captured your interest and attention, made a career out of it?
Well, some people are top-down people. I'm a bottom-up person. Kind of, I'm working from the details and then work my way up. An industry needs both kinds of people, but I have the feeling the bottom-up approach is very well suited to lean, because with lean, the big improvement is also tiny little details. Do you turn the right screw first or the left screw first? Where do you exactly put your screwdriver? So it's little things which the top-down people never get down to those level of details, but that's where I feel comfortable optimizing those details and then working my way up to the bigger picture. Lean is a lot of tiny details, a lot of tiny improvements, and we'll talk later about how to keep those improvements and preview it will be work standards. But yes, that's lean manufacturing, how to optimize, how to improve the continuous improvement process.
One thing that I have found to be interesting in the past in speaking with people that have experience working at Toyota is this idea that, when we talk about continuous improvement, we use a lot of terms and labels on things. But at Toyota, is there anything that maybe when you were there in it, you didn't realize exactly what it was? Maybe it was like later on when you look back on it and you realize like this was something special or unique that Toyota was doing that not everybody was doing. Are there some examples of that kind of thing?
Oh, yes, lots of them. I worked at Toyota for 5 years and I was never blamed for anything. Never, ever. When I was working for Bosch, it's pretty much every day I got blamed for some missing parts or some stuff. It feels like in Germany, when we have a problem, we try to find the guilty person. At Toyota, when we have a problem, we try to find a solution. And obviously, which one is better for the company, which one is also more comfortable to work with. But apparently in Germany, a lot of careers are made with trying to figure out that it's not me.
That is so interesting. So I like that insight. Like you were never blamed for anything there. So you said when you went to Bosch, you were blamed all the time. Was that kind of a rude awakening after starting at Toyota and going somewhere else and be like, what is this behavior that I'm experiencing?
It's a bit of an awakening, but also at the same time at Bosch, I was in manufacturing. And the further away you are from the actual shop floor, the more you can weasel through and kind of have some nice presentations. But on the shop floor, if the part is missing, you can't build the product. End of story. And that happens a lot. That happens also at Toyota, that sometimes parts are missing. But in Germany and probably also in many other Western countries, the blame culture is quite present. Not everywhere, not in the same magnitude, but sometimes more, sometimes less. But it feels like at Toyota, at least at my time, it was much less. Since then, Toyota has gotten a new CEO, Akio Toyoda, and he is more of let's call it an American-style manager. And he doesn't like any kind of disagreement or any kind of objection from below, which in my view degrades Toyota a bit. And I actually think now Denso is better than Toyota. Denso, part of the Toyota group, has now better production systems than Toyota Motor.
That's interesting. So you've been working in this discipline for a long time. Maybe we could first touch on that. What is it about what Toyota does that makes them oftentimes thought of as the gold standard for this, lean thing?
Well, it's a very good thoroughness. It's lots of things which come together, and it's not so much the different tools, not Kanban or Heijunka or whatever you want to call it, or Pokayoke, but it's them being very, very thorough. If they set a goal, they pursue it over generations of managers. For example, SMET, single minute exchange of dies. It took them 30 years to go from like a 2 to 8 hour change over time to like 2-minute change over time. But over 20 to 30 years, over generations of managers, they pursued the same goal. Whereas in the Western world, a new manager, everything old goes out, everything is new, everything is renamed, and new programs, new everything. But at Toyota, they kept on the same direction, the true north, over long periods of time. That's one big thing which Toyota does different. Canary is one of their policy deployments. They also really look at it. Does it actually work? Has it improved? The PDCA, everybody knows it, Plan, Do, Check, Act. But the check and act part, actually looking at it, has it improved? And if not, what do we need to do to get there? in a second round, in a third round, which in the Western world, once a deadline is over, you can't really go back and do it again because deadline is gone, the resources have been reallocated, and the next project is starting, and finding out that it actually didn't work is something nobody wants to do because it's extra work, it's bad for the career, but it's necessary to actually improve. And Toyota does the PDCA much different than the Western world. In the Western world, it's a lot about the do part, do things. In Toyota, the biggest part is actually the planning part. 2/3 of the time is spent analyzing, collecting data, understanding, and seeing what the problem actually is before they do anything, so as not to make it worse. That's one of the difference. Another difference is, and that I just learned quite recently, Toyota has a lot of the improvement done by the blue-collar shop floor workers. Whereas in the Western world, it's usually an engineer or some manager or some kind of person specifically to do improvement, which also works, but it makes it a lot slower because it's just much less manpower and much less understanding. Whereas the person on the shop floor working 8 hours per day with that machine, nobody knows the machine is good as the person in the blue collar. And Toyota and a few other companies, also including BMW, by the way, managed to access this resource, access this knowledge, and the blue collar people bringing a lot of improvement ideas. In a typical American company with improvement ideas like idea boxes and so, you get like 1 to 2 ideas per employee and year. At Toyota and BMW, it's like 20 to 50 ideas per employee and year. And of course, if you have one idea or if you have 50 ideas, 50 ideas per year, an employee is a much faster improvement cycle.
What is it that Toyota does differently with that particular level you refer to as the blue collar worker? What are they doing differently to extract those ideas, to get them engaged?
For many Western companies, an idea, an improvement, of course, I would like to have it from the blue colors, but it's something on top of the normal work. Kind of they have to go to the computer and fill out a form or some paper and get their ideas into words written down, and then it goes upwards to a manager who evaluates it and checks it, kind of says yes or no, eventually implements it. It's a whole long way for the idea to go up in management and then come down again to actually get the shop floor improved. It's all extra work for the worker. At Toyota, improvement is part of their regular everyday work. For example, at BMW, which is a very similar system, the supervisor, still a blue collar supervisor on the shop floor, has a checklist, his own work standard, if you will, and he has to do this checklist 2 to 3 times every day with different workers, kind of one checklist for one station and 2 to 3 stations every day. So with a typical supervisor having 12 stations, he gets every stations once per week at least. And on this checklist is find an improvement idea together with the worker. So part of their normal everyday work is to have an improvement idea from the workers, and it's part of their work. It's not something on top. It's not something going through the managers. It's just the supervisor and the worker. And if the supervisor and worker say it's good, they just do it. They don't ask the managers, they just do it. So the ownership of the improvements, the ownership of the work standards where the improvements are codified is with the people on the shop floor. Whereas in most Western companies, kind of the work standard and the improvement, the managers want everything to check and kind of to verify, and that makes it much slower. It makes it much more expensive. The average improvement at Toyota is estimated to bring like a benefit of like 100 or 200 euros per year. If it brings 100 and 200 euros per year and you involve management, you will not get 100 or 200 euros per year because the management time is already more expensive than what the improvement brings.
Yeah.
So there's no point in doing that. But at Toyota, if it's just the blue collar and the shop floor on the supervisor, they can do it quickly and efficiently and get this 200 euros. And if you have 50 times 200 euros per year versus one time 1,000 euros per year or so, it's a lot more improvement, it's a lot more benefit.
That's so interesting. And I know just the word improvement, or the idea of what is an improvement, in some organizations, it's a full DMAIC project. And if it doesn't have at least this, 6-figure impact, it doesn't even make the cut. So I really like what you said also, and I think we'll drill into a little more detail of this standard work, but you said a checklist where there's a question that's asked, how can we improve the works? It's like you've made it part of the expectation.
I liked your expression of the different sizes because I like to compare it to strawberries. Sometimes you have really, really big strawberries, and that's kind of the mega project. You build a new plant, you develop a new product, and you have people which are full time doing nothing but this project, kind of developing or setting up the new plant. Then you have the medium sized project, and that's usually an A3 form, kind of a PDCA, A3, and it's people who still have maybe a small team, but they do it on the top of their or on additional to their normal work and have kind of medium-sized improvement projects. But you have a lot of those tiny strawberries on the plan too, those 100, 200, 300 euros improvements. It's an A3 is already too expensive to do for that. And to get those small strawberries, you need the shop floor workers, and they can do it quickly, efficiently. They're the first person to actually see those small strawberries lying around and have the time to pick it up. And most Western companies, they have the big projects, the big strawberries, they have the medium strawberries, kind of the A3 sheets, but they never have the time to pick up the small strawberries, which are also very delicious.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I think that that concept is one that probably a lot of people deal with, because improvement is such a thing that all seems kind of intuitive. I'm sure everybody listening would love to improve their work in some way, but there's this question of how much autonomy do I have to improve my work, and how do you encourage people to take initiative and want to improve when maybe they had an idea once and somebody said, no, we can't do that, and so like, oh, well, I guess we can't do any of my ideas, so they kind of give up. Do you have any advice on how to frame those different size improvements?
Actually, Toyota and BMW is a little bit struggling with that too. A lot of the shop floor workers, the blue collar, they see themselves as little people, and above them, the smart, very highly paid manager who knows everything or pretends to know everything. And a lot of them are a bit hesitant to do something. And I talked with a BMW production manager, and he also kind of sometimes, as a process confirmation, verifies his checklist and kind of does this checklist too with, of course, not very often, but sometimes with the workers too. The workers like, I hope I don't say anything wrong. I'm too scared, and kind of it's a really big, expensive guy. He's like 5 levels above me in hierarchy, and they're kind of hesitant, and not all of them, but a lot of them are hesitant and too shy. And they're putting in a lot of effort to make them feel comfortable, to make them open and willing to actually have those ideas and present those ideas and influence their own workplace. And it is a bit of an uphill struggle, and the manager puts a lot of time in that to get those ideas and get those workers comfortable to do that. And as you said, if you ever hit them on the head, you will never get an idea again. So it's a lot of mindset change, and it's a mindset change. You can't just send an email around, now we do it that way, but it's a lot of on the front lines, talking with people and teaching them, teaching also the managers in between. That's kind of, if the manager in between hits them on the head and the top manager is kind of nice, you get the same result, hit on the head. So it is a lot of effort, it's a lot of struggle, and a lot of dealing with people and emotions and feelings.
Makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of behavioral, and you might call them leadership skills, that are required to make an improvement system work inside of an organization. I want to start to navigate towards this concept of standard work. Now, when an improvement idea, I love the visual, or the idea of, you've got a checklist and you have this question basically of like, what improvements can be made today, and the managers, supervisors running through the checklist. I'm kind of guess. I know Toyota is famous for standard work and having standard work on everything. I'm assuming that if there's an improvement, how do those manifest? Is that like a change to the standard work sometimes, or is there a time when an improvement doesn't show up as a trackable change?
Well, the goal is to keep the improvement. If you change something for the better, you want to keep it that way. And some changes are automatic. If you make a product design change, engineering change order, new product, it will stay that way because you make it differently. If you build a different machine, if you kind of throw out an old tool and take a new tool, you have the new tool, and you don't need to take care that you keep on the new tool because it's the only tool you have available. But a lot of improvements are organizational, kind of, do I turn on the right screw first or the left screw first? Kind of which way do I organize my work? And for that, you need a work standard. And by the way, you said standard work, and that's a big source of confusion because there are work standards and there are standard work. And that's something related but different. A work standard is describing in the necessary detail how to do a work. And a work standard is the best known way how to do it. And best means, first of all, safest, best quality, and then efficient. Kind of the work standard is the best way how to do that. Standard work is something kind of in which sequence you do it and who does it what and where do they do it. So it is related, but a little bit different and often confused. When I say talk about improvements, the first and foremost, the starting point is the work standard, the best way for one person to do one job.
Help us understand the difference between standard work, work standards, SOPs, leader standard work. Sometimes these terms get thrown around as synonyms.
Oh yeah. There's a big mess, and a work standard or SOP, standard operating procedure, it's basically a checklist. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and check if it works, and then you do this, and then you do this. Kind of what you do in which sequence with some hints on kind of what to take care, like if it's hot, don't touch it with your fingers, otherwise you get burned. But a work standard is basically a checklist. Sometimes with pictures, sometimes with additional instructions, but it is basically a checklist. And we also have them like in airplanes or so, but it is a checklist, a work standard. Standard work is a question, who does which checklist at what location? Kind of where do you put the machines? Do you make an U? Do you make an I line? Which machine goes where? Which worker, if you have multiple workers, one worker for multiple machines, is worker one doing machine A, B, C or D, E, F? Kind of which machines are by what worker? And at those machines are doing the work standard. So the standard work is kind of overarching envelope for the work standard. And now you mentioned the next one, leader standard work, which, just to add to the confusion, is again a work standard, not a standard work. The idea of leader standard work is basically, well, work standards, first you do this, then you do this, and then you do this, is a great way to organize work for blue-collar people. This can also help you with leadership, kind of the work of a manager, the work of a leader, what to do first, second, and third. With a small, tiny problem, a work standard works best if it's repeatable, if it's always the same thing. The less repeatable it is, the more difficult it is to do a work standard. And the higher up you go in the hierarchy, the less repeatable it is. A worker, blue-collar worker, takes a screw, put it in there, and do this 500 times today, and then you're done. For a manager, it's a different thing every time. So it's more and more difficult to make a work standard. There are work standards, and actually some of the best ones are actually really old ones, but they're really, really good. Training with an industry, like job instructions, job relations. How do you teach people in a work standard? How do you handle problems between people on the shop floor? And this training with an industry is really, really a good work standard for manager. And just to give it a fancy name, they call it not leadership work standard, but leadership standard work, because it sounds fancier. But it is a leadership work standard.
So if in case standard work, leader standard work, or work standards are a new concept for you, I want to give a chance to plug your book here, all about work standards. I got a copy of this sometime in the last year and have referred to it. You've got some really great stuff in here. I know myself in working with what we might call SOPs, I've had many conversations internally answering questions like, well, how much detail should I put in this? And I think you have a good some rules of thumb on how to create a good standard.
Well, basically, not too much, not too little, which doesn't help you very much. A lot of people, when they write a standard, they make the mistake and try to put in everything. Kind of, if you pick up a pen, then you have to press the button here to get the ink out and so. Yeah. And the standard is not made for idiots. It's made for your blue-collar workers, and they're not idiots. They know how to handle a pen, they know how to handle a screwdriver. You need to write in there what they could forget. You need to give them a checklist to make sure, do this. For the next step, be careful that you don't do this, but do that, because otherwise it goes wrong. You need to have the important stuff in there. You don't need to have every little detail or possibility or everything which could be done or everything, but you need to get the important stuff in there. It also depends on how long your cycle is, how long your takt is. If you have a 30-second cycle, you can go into a lot of detail. Because the worker is supposed to remember the work standard. One of the part of the checklist at BMW and Toyota is see if the worker can explain you the work standard. And for a 30-second cycle, he can explain it in great detail. If you have a 2-hour cycle, like if you make a machine tool, like you make a milling machine, and often it's a 2 or 8-hour takt. And with an 8-hour takt, you can't go in like 10 seconds intervals, do this, then do this. So it's necessarily much more crude, much more high level. And you need higher trained people. Kind of if you assemble a milling machine, the people need to know more and kind of fill in the gaps of the work standards with their training and expertise. Whereas if you have a 30-second cycle on the assembly line, the worker can be trained much easier. Kind of you can hire an unskilled labor and train him properly, still take some time, but within a few weeks or months, he will be an expert in doing the 30-second cycle. Within 2 months, he will not be an expert at doing an 8-hour cycle for assembling a milling machine. But yeah, the level of detail, not too much, not too little, it needs to help the worker. It needs to prevent errors in both in quality and safety. But it should not belittle the worker with tiny details which are obvious.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think I remember reading in your book was the idea that should help somebody who's been trained once or twice to follow the process rather than to take somebody who has no idea what you're doing completely, to explain everything. So, and for me, that was kind of that helps,
yes.
Like a checklist. The other analogy that I've heard used, I don't recall if it was in your book or somewhere else, is like the difference between the owner's manual for an airplane versus the checklist that, we've heard a lot about how pilots have a checklist before they take off or they run through.
Yes.
And they use that to make sure they don't make any errors in the process, as opposed to knowing how to change a fuse if one goes out.
Yes. The important part, the workers must be trained beforehand. And with that, the standard can be in a little bit less detail. To give you a counter example, you probably have assembled at one point in your life IKEA furniture. And you get a work standard with it, and you probably do it for the first time. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And don't look too closely at my shelf. Sometimes you will see a board which is the wrong way around because I was doing it for the first time and I messed it up. Because I was not properly trained in assembling IKEA. I love doing it, but it's often kind of a new product and kind of the first time for me to assemble that. But on the shop floor, you have a proper training. And Toyota does like 1 to 2 weeks training before they get on the assembly line. So they actually know what they're doing. And in this case, the standard needs only to help them, but doesn't need to have every little detail or possibility.
It's very, very interesting. So what are some examples where without the standard work, the improvement fails to catch on or doesn't stick? What are some examples there?
Without the work standard? Yeah. I see this a lot too. People have an idea of improvement and then they kind of tell the people on the shop floor to do it. And maybe the people on the shop floor do it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they do it only when the person is looking. But if the person is gone, it's forgotten, or the other shift never got informed that there's a new change or something. And over time, it will fall apart again. The improvement will vanish. In end effect, it's the same as not having any improvement. Actually, it's worse because you put in time and effort in the improvement, but then you don't use it. The challenging part is to keep the improvement alive, to keep it active, to make sure everybody is using the best practice, the best known way to do something. Keep on using that until you find a better known way. But if you don't have a work standard, it will drift apart. One person thinks, oh, I like that one better. It's and kind of the feeling, I like it better versus it is actually better, but it just does it one way and the other person, I like it the other way, does it a different way. So everybody does it a little bit different, and that makes it actually makes it harder to improve, because if everybody does it differently, what is actually the best way? Where do you start?
Yeah, I'm curious if we get into this concept of leader standard work. And you mentioned a minute ago about maybe Toyota isn't the best in the world at doing this thing anymore. I'm sure it's different across.
It was at one point, but not anymore.
Not anymore. And you mentioned Denso. Are there some connections to things like leader standard work or behaviors, or what is it? What are the things that you would say are separating them? Is it culture? Is it leader standard work?
In the old times at Toyota, person from a lower level, even blue collar, could object, and he or she was heard. Kind of, if the people on the shop floor say, no, that doesn't work, the people above say, they're probably right. We should look at it again and see what we can do differently. And that's is a really powerful thing, because if the people on the shop floor thinks it doesn't work, chances are it doesn't really work. If you push it through anyway, you make it worse. And that happens a lot in Western companies. Kind of, you don't even ask the people on the shop floor, and the people on the shop floor are trained not to object to the manager. So a lot of ideas come from top down and don't really work, and kind of make it even worse than before. But somehow the shop floor has to mess around with this and kind of do it without actual improvement. And in old times, people on the bottom could object and were heard and could overrule or kind of change the mind of the managers above, even like multiple levels above. And that makes a much better improvement, because it makes much more likely that it actually works. But this seems to be slowly changing at Toyota Motor. And Akio Toyoda, to my understanding, is someone who doesn't like disagreement. And if you're a middle-level manager or kind of even high-level manager, if you disagree with the big boss, then your career will have a serious dent. And as a result, people won't disagree with them. You're so wonderful, boss. Excellent idea, boss. Couldn't you have done it better? You're so right. Absolutely. Let's do it that way. And that's how you drive a company against the wall.
What, what's interesting and strikes me, and as a leader who values things like continuous improvement and values respect for employees and believes that the best ideas come from, the people closest to the work, what are some signs that you might be suppressing some of that feedback that you need to hear?
If everybody agrees with you, it feels good, but it's a warning sign. You need a voice of disagreement. You need some people which disagree with you. And it feels a bit annoying. It feels a bit unusual. It feels a bit not so nice, because I don't like people disagreeing with me. But you need this disagreement. The term is constructive feedback. You don't need a full-blown out fight. If it's a fight, then it's already escalated too much. But you need people disagreeing with the ideas, and it needs to feel a little bit uncomfortable, because otherwise, even a smart manager, high-paid manager, he doesn't know everything. And the disagreement will make it better, and it needs to be heard and understood. And it's not comfortable. People don't like it, but it's necessary. So if nobody disagrees with you, then you have a problem.
Are you struggling to ignite real change in your continuous improvement program? Firestarter is your field guide. Real stories, proven strategies, no fluff. Get it now on Amazon. I'm curious if you have an opinion or advice on this idea of everybody loves to do their own improvements. Like if you ask me, hey, how can we improve the work? If I have an idea and you let me do it, of course I'm going to love that, right? But let's say that, you're a shift manager over a couple of shifts and there was some great idea that you saw in another work cell, and now you want to share that with us. Bringing in ideas that weren't created in that particular environment can be a little bit, challenging sometimes. Do you have any insights on how to do that sort of improvement?
First of all, if you do an improvement, if you do it only for yourself, it's not an improvement, it's chaos. At Toyota and BMW, if there's an improvement, it's done between the supervisor and the worker, but all supervisors of this workstation, kind of all shifts, early, late, and night shift, all of them must agree with signatures that the work standard has changed. If one of them says no, they need to figure out why not, and do we do it or do we not do it? Kind of, they need to get every shift leaders agreement. Every supervisor from every shift, so typically 3 people for one workstation, need to agree, and then everybody has to do it that way. Not just one person, but everybody has to do it that way. Either everybody does it or nobody does it. There isn't really a halfway where some people do it and some people don't, because then the standard drifts apart again, and you have again a chaos, but not really the best known way. So the need to get the agreement of everybody. The second part of your question about how to share it, that's also part of the culture. At Toyota, they have something called Yokoten, which is kind of the horizontal sharing. It's their database. And when they have an improvement, so especially for the medium-sized ideas, they put it in the database. And if somebody else has a problem, they often just search this database and see, what did other people do? What are their ideas? Can we learn from them? So this horizontal sharing is a big thing in the Toyota culture, actually most of the Japanese culture, to get ideas from everywhere. In the Western world, it's a little bit not invented here, kind of we know our place and others, it's all different. That's something I often hear in consulting. Yeah, Toyota does it this way, but ours is completely different and that. Yeah, it is different. But some ideas still work, or at least can be adapted.
How do they actually facilitate that when an improvement is shared? It sounds like there needs to be, some sort of information exchange. And it sounds a little bit like what you were talking about with how things can slow down if you have too much bureaucracy in that. So how does that actually function at Toyota, as you're mentioning?
The bureaucracy. A standard is basically paperwork. And improving a standard is more paperwork, because you have a new standard, you have an old standard, you need to train everybody, you need to make a revision management to make sure what has changed, because if it turns out it didn't work, you need to go back and see what did we actually change and roll it back. So it is a lot of paperwork, and nobody likes paperwork. The task is, what they want to do is, everybody does it the same best known way. Everybody does it the same sequence, the same order, the same approach, the same torque, the same movements, the same everything, to make sure everybody does it the best way, the safest way, the best quality, the best productivity. And that's the ultimate goal. And a work standard is just the best tools I have to make sure everybody who does this work does it the same way. And yes, it is paperwork, but they haven't found any better way yet to have everybody do it the same way. That's the ultimate goal.
So it sounds almost like I don't know if they're using Word documents or not, but it's like a document with track changes on, and you're saying, here's a proposed change. And then
yes, it's like with software, the change log.
Yeah.
With software, I'm sure you know the change log. We changed this, we changed this, we changed this. Those change log can be very detailed, because if something goes wrong, you have a bug, you need to figure out, was it the last change we did? And similar with work standards, on the work standard, often on the back or on a second page is kind of a change log. What did we change from version 3.5 to 3.6 to 3.7? To kind of follow up and see what were the changes, and maybe one of those changes turned out to be actually making it worse, then you can undo it if you know what you actually changed.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's on this theme of standard work and work standard and leader standard work, basically, you touched on some things that I would say definitely get into, like leadership and strategic planning. You mentioned the Hoshin Connery. Maybe there's some behavior patterns. Behavior patterns is maybe a synonym for work standards in strategic planning. What are some of those things at the leadership level? You mentioned the idea of a checklist. Are there some meeting structure, some strategic planning type stuff that you would suggest, like these are best practices that can be more or less replicated?
There are different checklists. But for example, what I very often see is that the plant manager, generally higher level management, needs to participate at a certain number of shop floor meetings every week. You have shop floor meetings, you have a shop floor meeting for the assembly area, for the welding area, for the milling area, and they need to attend a certain number of meetings, like on Mondays they're in the logistics area, on Tuesdays they're welding area, on Wednesdays they're in the billing area, to visit the shop floor, see what's going on, and kind of attend those meetings. That's nowadays almost that's very common. I've seen it in a lot of companies. Even better standards also have kind of a checklist. Verify one standard every day or something similar. Like on Monday, you go to the logistic area and verify one work standard in logistics. On Tuesday, you go to the welding area and verify a process confirmation for one work standard in the welding area. And Wednesday, you do this for the assembly area and kind of for them to be very, very close to the shop floor, to go to Gemba. I'm sure you've heard about this, to go to the shop floor.
Gemba.
And a lot of people see this as just, well, we'll just walk on the shop floor. I see lots of green machines. People bow to me because I'm important. That's not it. Going to the shop floor is actually, again, looking in detail, the bottom-up part. You need to go into great detail a little bit. Of course, if you're the plant manager, you're in charge of 2,000 people, you can't verify all of them. But you need to make a sample check every now and then to see, do the standards work? Is it followed? Where do I have problems? Where people are not following the work standards? Why are they not following the work standard? And this occasional sample deep dive needs to be done for the higher ups to understand what's actually going on at the shop floor. And again, they can't check everything, but those samples are really, really necessary. So the alternative is somebody else does the sampling for you, makes a nice presentation, and you get kind of in your comfortable chair in the meeting room, you get a summary presentations, and then you will be lied to because the person doing the summary will make it so in a way so he looks good or she looks good and tries to tell you the good news and not the bad ones. So it doesn't look bad. But again, if there are no bad news, if nobody disagrees with you, if nobody brings you bad news, then it's something seriously wrong. You need to figure out what are problems. You need to have people disagree with you, with the necessary politeness, of course, but you need to have people disagree with you and you need to be reported problems. If you only hear good news, that's the bad news.
That's I forget the quote that slipped in my mind, but the absence of problems reported does not mean the absence of problems, right?
Yes.
Yeah, if
you have no problems, then that's your biggest problem.
There you go. That's the one. That's and you mentioned the term Gemba. I love to make sure that we define some of these, particularly some of these Japanese terms. But could you define what go to the Gemba means?
Gemba is one of the three gens. Gens is basically real. There's Gemba, Genjitsu, Genchi, Genbutsu, and it's all reality. If a detective goes to the scene of the crime, he goes to the Genjitsu or Genbutsu. And it means look at the real thing. Look at what's actually happening. Don't look at presentations, look at reality. And in most cases, that means actually looking at the shop floor. The presentation says a machine has an uptime of 95%, and you go to the shop floor and it's always stopped, then the presentation is wrong. And it is to understand reality, because if you don't do this, if you don't look at it yourself, there is a tendency of the managers between you and the shop floor to give you a selective version of the truth.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. The thing that comes to mind, if you don't have a North Star of some kind that you're continuously measuring against, sometimes those rotating short-term goals can kind of be a little bit of a shell game, kind of think of it,
I have here a beautiful example. I was working at a car maker and I was in the team for the wheel support, and our goal was to save money. The wheel support had lots of aluminum parts, and to save money, replace them with steel parts. And I got this from one worker, which was working there for 40 years. He tells me, well, that's something every 3 years. Kind of like 20 years ago, we had the idea to save money, so we replaced the aluminum parts with the steel parts. 3 years later, the idea was to save weight because it makes better performance. What would he do? We replaced the steel parts with the aluminum parts because they're lighter. 3 years later, there was a project to save money. Guess what? Out the aluminum, in the steel. 3 years later, it was to save weight again. Out the steel, in the aluminum. So there went lots from aluminum to steel to aluminum to steel and aluminum to steel. It's a lots and lots of improvement activities, but they're just turning in circles and not really improving anything. And that happens a lot.
Oh, that's such a good story. I love that one. So when it comes to things like business reviews, I'm curious if you have any advice or words of wisdom on how to keep tabs on, metrics that might be shared, any bits of advice or best practices that you've learned through your experience.
the more complicated a metric is to calculate, the more likely it is to fudge, because the more options you have to fudge it. The less complicated it is, like counting parts, the harder it is to fudge. So try to go for the easy metrics. The more complicated metrics, the more aggregated metrics are much easier to fudge. And no matter which metric, every now and then do a deep dive, verify on the shop floor if it's correct or not. And if it turns out people are lying to you, then you can get angry and make sure they don't lie to you again, or at least not as much.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make about, where leaders can draw the line, and inviting people to share issues. You want to encourage that. You want to not get frustrated with that, but also enforcing the integrity, like seeing something and not saying something is,
Yeah. It's also a big part of what kind of culture do you have in the company. And some companies over decades of the same culture, the biggest liar is the one at the top. Great example, or not so great example, Boeing was at one point known as a really great company. Kind of, if it's not Boeing, I'm not going. It was really safe because it had a management system which was very much open. Quality concerns were heard, and it was a very good communication, and problems were reported up. And then Boeing took over McDonnell Douglas, and somehow the McDonnell Douglas management took over the Boeing management, and now Boeing is run by McDonnell Douglas management. And McDonnell Douglas was in big problems because they did exactly not do this. They kept problems down. They only focused on cost, and that's where Boeing is now.
Yeah, I'm hearing a theme in a couple of these examples that you've shared. The Toyota one with maybe suppressing dissent and suppressing problems. You mentioned earlier that Denso is what you would consider to be more of a gold standard. What are some specific things that Denso is doing that are notable?
My mentor from Japan, my former Toyota boss, Professor Nakano, he told me a very great story. When he went to Toyota with an improvement idea, he went to middle management. He wanted to make a project, a research project or something as a professor. He later became a professor too. And very often the answer was, well, I would like to, but my boss doesn't like it, so it's not going to happen. When he went to other Toyota group members, the answer was often different. I would like to, but my boss doesn't want to, but wait 3 years, we have a new boss, and then it will work. And when he went to Denso, if the answer was, well, I would like to, but my boss doesn't want to, but don't worry, I'll convince my boss otherwise. I can change the mind of my boss from the bottom up. And that is a big difference. I also know I talked with another Denso manager, and in old times, there was a lot and lots of exchange between the different Toyota group companies, and people from Denso had their desk at Toyota Motor and the other way around. And there was a lot of sharing of people between companies to make it actually one big company and to get the same culture. But the latest I know is Denso no longer does it because they don't want to have their own people infected by the Toyota culture, by the more rigorous new Toyota ways. I don't want to say this, new Toyota ways and new Toyota culture, and they try to isolate and keep their open Denso culture and not get infected by the Toyota boss is right, you're wrong attitude.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like a common theme here. I've got a section I'd like to move in here to next called the rapid fire. These are just some short questions, quick top of mind answers here. First one is the most important job of a leader is to blank.
Motivate your people.
It's a great answer.
Lead your people.
I know that Lean's not all about the tools, but is there a go-to problem-solving tool or visual device that you like to turn to or refer to?
For me, it's the most important tool is not really a tool, it's a philosophy. It's PDCA. Do a lot of planning beforehand, unless it's burning. If the house is burning, extinguish the fire, but then do a thorough analysis and see what you can do so it doesn't burn again. But do a lot of planning, then do it, and then check if it actually worked. Do the plan, do check, act, see if it actually improved, and if it did not improve, be honest about it and fix it.
Excellent. I want to give you a minute to mention your books. I put this one up here, the All About Work Standards. Do you have another one that you've written recently?
Actually, my first book, it's all about pull production. And as the name says, it's all about pull production. It's about Kanban, but not only Kanban, but also Kanban is the best known way. But there are many other ways to do pull, all about pull production and all about works. And those are my two main lean books. I'm working on a book on SMET, but it's not yet done and will still take some time. Anything else? Read my blog. Yeah, it has now 600 articles. I'm writing the blog since 12 years, every week, one article with 1,000 words. And pretty much any lean related topic, you'll find something about it on my blog. And if not, let me know, then I'll write an article.
Absolutely. I definitely recommend it. That's how I think that's how I got introduced to you, basically, was from your blog or an article. And then I was implementing work standards at our company. And I thought, well, what better book than All About Work Standards? I ought to go check that out. So
thank you.
Definitely recommend that. Okay, another one. Finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is?
Continuous improvement is finding lots of small strawberries, some middle-sized strawberries, and a few big strawberries, and make sure you keep the improvement. You don't lose it again.
Excellent. Okay, do you have a favorite question that you like to turn to?
Favorite question in my work: what is the problem?
What is the problem?
What do you actually try to solve? And so often people do something without knowing what the problem is. For example, very often I come across plants that say, our problem is we don't have Kanban. No, Kanban is a tool. But why do you think you need Kanban? And Kanban is a great tool, but it's not the tool for everything, and your problem may not even need Kanban. Or I had a bachelor student which had a task to improve something on an assembly line of an automotive maker. For over 2 hours, I asked him every 15 minutes, so what's your problem? What's your goal? What do you want to achieve? Every time I got a different answer, and he was getting more and more nervous until we finally figured out what he actually wanted to improve. Before I got he didn't know it before, had very unclear goals, but if you don't know what you want to achieve, if you don't know where you want to be, you'll never end up there.
That's a good one. What is the problem? Nothing like sitting in a meeting for, hopefully it's not too long, but sat in some of these occasionally where the conversation starts and at some point you're like, wait a minute, what is the actual problem here?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's happened to a lot of folks.
A lot.
Is there something that is maybe a mistaken belief about lean or people misinterpret about lean that you want to clarify?
A lot of people think lean is doing whatever Toyota does. No. What Toyota does works well for Toyota. And Toyota is a mass-producing car maker. If you're making a different product, if you're making yogurts or milling machines or God knows what lumber, you will have different things. If you copy one-to-one the tools from Toyota, it will not work for you. If you don't understand the tools, it will not work for you. You can get inspiration from Toyota, but find your own way, find your own solutions matching for your problems. It doesn't help you if you use the solutions for Toyota problems in your company and you're doing something completely different.
Is there, that's a great answer. Thank you for that. Is there a mistake that people maybe get wrong as they're implementing lean in maybe from the culture that you could give us one piece of advice and help clarify? Avoid making this one big mistake.
Don't delegate your lean stuff. Don't delegate it to some outsiders, some consultants, or some kind of newly graduated engineers, which kind of you just hired and tell them, well, now you're doing this improvement. Lean is something for everybody. So it has to be done on the blue-collar shop floor, but it also has to be supported on the top-level CEO. And it's something which improvement should be high on the agenda of managers. How do you get improvement? How do you get your people to improve? The higher up you are, the less improvement you do yourself, but the more you enable others to do improvement.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. You've had some really, really great stories and interesting experience. I really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
All right. So thank you very much and goodbye.
For our listeners, if you'd like to suggest a guest, ask a question, or give us any ideas for episodes or comment, you can certainly reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. Chris, how can people connect with you? You mentioned your blog, allaboutlean.com. LinkedIn, is that the best place?
Yeah, LinkedIn, my blog. I have a comment section on my blog, and also I have said I'm happily answer some questions kind of every now and then, like once or twice per week. I get an email from somebody asking me some lean question, and if it's just a 5-minute answer, I'll happily give my wisdom or my knowledge, knowledge, and try to help people lean, because I write the blog, I do the lean not to become famous or to become rich, but to help people manufacture stuff.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. And this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, be sure to add a comment, like, follow, subscribe on the socials, and share the podcast with your friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change. This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com.